Yo, what's going on guys? HyperX here. Welcome back to the video for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, and today is an exciting day because we get to talk about the full game. Joined by 26 in Paradise. How you guys doing?
Great.
Yeah. So obviously, massive shout out to Capcom. We have been playing alongside Sox as well, but he's busy editing some videos. We have been playing through the whole game. And of course today, we want to talk about our impressions, having gone through the story, having sort of, raised our master rank, fought some cool monsters, tested out some new skills, basically experienced pretty much, well, a large chunk of what the game has to offer. There are still a few more things we're progressing, we're working towards, like our master rank unlocks, different things like that. But today, I want to use this as an opportunity to basically talk about everything that we have discussed. Now, in terms of stuff, obviously we will touch on topics like Endgame. There won't be any specific spoilers. We're not going to show you the final boss or anything like that, but we will talk around mechanics, things that we've encountered, kind of endgame flow, that sort of stuff. But we're going to talk about it in order, so we'll encounter story and weapons and stuff. So, if we get to anything that we deem you guys might not necessarily want to know about, we will give you a spoiler warning. But largely speaking, this is going to be based on our experience. So, if you guys do enjoy this, a like would be super appreciated. Obviously, if you have any questions, let us know in the comments down below. We'll do our best to answer those, and do be sure to keep it locked because we have a ton of content coming your way. So as always, if you guys want guides on absolutely everything, you're in the right place. But anyway, guys, so we've been playing a lot. What do you guys like? Before we even talk about specific things, just initial impressions. What are you guys saying? 26, you go first.
Now, let Paradise go first.
Okay.
I'm interested to see what Paradise thinks about it, because we're usually on very much the same page when it comes to Monster Hunter. And for Rise, we kind of saw some of the issues with Rise before it arose, but I want to see what Paradise really is thinking about.
Well, first of all, I just want to say we can finally talk about Sunbreak. It's finally time. I think I'm assuming that a lot of people that will watch this would have watched our base Rise review, and I feel like we put a lot of truth on the table, and people didn't want to listen to it. So this time we're going to do the same thing, and hopefully people will listen. First of all, there's good and there's bad to talk about, so I think people will get the full picture of what to expect when they go into Sunbreak. The one thing I mentioned is that this was advertised as a massive expansion. Okay, we have put quite a lot of hours into this. We're basically almost done with everything that the game has to offer at this point. But my very first top level impressions is that there was some cool new monsters, some cool new fights. There was a period of time, and I will get into this a bit more, where there was nothing new, and we were kind of like, what is going on? Which I think people will definitely experience when they first start playing the expansion. A couple new maps, There's a lot of things that we wanted changing that were in there, in terms of how weapons play and the Silkbinds that they got and all that kind of stuff. But then there were also things that we kind of had on our wish list that weren't implemented, making turf wars a more common, frequent thing. But they're in there, but you've kind of never experienced it.
I haven't seen a single one myself.
I've seen one.
I haven't seen a single
Literally one.
Yeah, I've seen the same one 3 times.
Oh no, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, my top level impressions is that I as a Monster Hunter fan, I am enjoying it. I think that there is a lot of fun to be had in Sunbreak. Some of the new monsters in particular are quite cool, but I don't want to give a final verdict, but I would say my expectations were quite high because it was massive expansion, new monsters being added in. It's traditional G rank coming in. That's always an exciting part. There's been the whole ongoing talk of difficulty in base Rise not being there, and this is obviously like master rank, effectively G rank, so it's bumping up the difficulty to another level, and there's so much to unpack.
We'll unpack
that's
it
all my
we'll
top level thoughts together,
yeah.
But we will unpack it as we go through. Yeah.
26.
Definitely very similar to what Paradise is saying. I think it is at its core a better version of Rise. The core gameplay is better than Rise, but the content around it feels very sparse compared to what I was expecting. But even maybe it's this book that we've been spoiled as Monster Hunter fans, and we're getting used to the monsters over time, so we kind of got that almost a weird fatigue on seeing some of the monsters, especially if there's variants or whatever, and they don't really feel all that new. Iceborne was similarly marketed as a massive expansion, and that only had a very similar amount of like monsters in that game. But in this one, the way that they've paced it, it feels like you get to about halfway through your MRs and you haven't seen all that much of new monsters. And when you do see a new monster or a returning monster that everybody wants to see, like Gore, it is sick. But it's like those moments are very spread thin across the board.
Exactly, yeah.
So they've added a bunch of things and fixed a bunch of things, but they've introduced a bunch of different problems in the game as well. It's like they had the ball, they're about to kick it in the goal, and they fumbled it a little bit, but it's still going to be a game. I can see people not liking this all that much initially, but over the coming months, they'll like it more because the core gameplay's changed. They've added a lot of things in there, and there's a lot of nuance to a lot of the mechanics that are going on, especially with like the introduction of switch skills. But if you didn't like Rise, I don't think you're necessarily gonna like.
Yeah, it hasn't like massively changed
change
the formula, so to speak.
Yeah.
I definitely think like I mean to again like we're going to go into like this deeper, so anyone would sort of like wanted to know why we'll explain this stuff. So I think like top level there's definitely fun to be had. Like we've definitely enjoyed the stuff that we have done, but 100% what the guy said, like to kind of actually like peel back the curtain and sort of explain what we mean by this. Like you go into Master Rank, right? You can experience it yourself when it comes to the actual like cutscenes and story, but you're presented with this, you work your way to Elgato, you're in a new place, you're like, oh, this is cool, new town, new people, new location, like the typical excitement you get from a new expansion, which is awesome. But then you begin, and although, your first hunt might be against like a couple of the new subspecies and stuff, it's kind of strange because there's always this point in Monster Hunter games, regardless, you go through low rank, then in high rank you're fighting the same monsters with more health, you go into Master Rank, you're fighting the same monsters with more health, more moves. There's always that kind of element of repeat. And again, this may well be one of those things where the more Monster Hunter games you play, the more times you see the same monsters. Very similar to Pokemon. If you've played every Pokemon game, you might get to the point and be like, oh my goodness, not another Pikachu in the grass. Can you give me something new? So there definitely does come that sort of like monster fatigue. But I think the reason we sort of felt that exacerbated at the beginning is because you start this new expansion, which is hella exciting. We saw the trailers where they show off lots of new Silkbind moves, lots of new skills, lots of new monsters, but weirdly, you progress through the first few master ranks. You don't get given the new skills at the very beginning. You get one at the very beginning, but the exciting ones you don't get till much later. And you also don't really encounter a lot of the new monsters that you want to fight until, I want to say it was like Master Rank 3 or 4, I can't remember off the top of my head, but basically the point is you had to go through a few Master Ranks, which again, might not sound too much, but when you're jumping into a brand new expansion, you've seen the trailers, you've seen all the stuff, you're like, I want to fight the new stuff, I want the new skills, and you're playing for a good, I don't know, I want to say like a good like 10-ish, maybe 15, maybe even 15 hours, maybe, before you
depending
really...
on how they play.
Yeah, depending on how you play.
If they're farming sets and stuff, then it's going to be even longer.
Yeah, and then so you play through all that time, and you're largely speaking fighting old monsters. You're fighting Master Rank Goshalag, Master Rank Tetranodon, Master Rank, all these different ones like that, and then finally you kind of get your urgent and you get the new stuff, and then it starts to get exciting. So I think the weird thing with Sunbreak was the pacing was slightly strange. You could almost like slice off that front 3 Master Ranks and just be like, let's dive in. I know you don't want to give everyone the super exciting stuff right at the start. I know obviously you need to build up to that. I'm perfectly like aware of that. But it definitely felt slightly weirdly paced because every time you get the new Master Rank and you get the new skill, you get the new quest, we're like, are we finally going to fight Gore? It's like, no, we're going to fight Tetranodon again. It's like, okay, cool. Are we finally going to fight Gore now? It's like, no. There was quite a lot of that. But then when it finally did kick in, then it started to get like really exciting, and then we started to enjoy the new fights, like fighting things like Gore was sick, getting some of the new skills was sick. So it definitely has that moment, but it's quite delayed, which is quite a strange feeling for a brand new expansion. To that point of like what you said, like 2.6, like if you didn't like base Rise and you came in expecting to like feel something new, you could play for the first like 10 hours and it would still largely speaking feel like Rise until you suddenly start getting that new stuff, which is interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like in any Monster Hunter game, the further into the game you get, the more things unlock and open up, and more armor sets, more weapons, more mechanics sometimes. Like in Base Rise, you got like the rampage weapons and stuff like that. So things do traditionally open up, but it is a little weird when you're playing like 10 hours of an expansion and you're like, I've seen like one new monster and I don't have the new switch skills apart from one that I already maybe used in the demo or something like that, So that's a little weird. I think people will go into it expecting a great new time with all the new Silkbinds, and it's going to take a little bit of playing before you actually get that stuff.
Yeah, but with that being said, when you do encounter that stuff, like, let's talk on something like the new monsters and stuff. Like, what did you guys think on these things? Because obviously, once we did start encountering them, you know, we got the Gore fight, we got the Espinas fight, we got like, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones, like some of the new ones, even some of the, like, to be fair, when we saw the trailers, when we were speaking about like, oh, Magma Almudron's like, you know, just a fire rate Almudron, but it was actually a really cool experience, right? Like, 2-6, what did you think of some of the monster fights?
I think in general the monster fights were pretty cool in terms of like the spectacle and just seeing the new moves. And even though we're saying that the old monsters is kind of disappointing, they did all have like all these new moves. So when you did see a new move, you're like, oh, that's the new Monster Rank move. That's kind of cool. And some of those new moves are kind of like really drastic in terms of like the changes and stuff like that. Or even there might be even small changes, like when you encounter Rajang, for instance. You used to knock him over and get his like tail to like create a window for damage. Now he just gets instantly back up and does that. So it's interesting to see all those new monsters. I definitely feel like there's some monsters that got the treatment, like Gore is just awesome. Like the visuals on him are just absolutely amazing, and like his theme, all of that is super imposing. And then there's additional monsters that I don't really want to spoil for people, but it's some really cool stuff, especially like the final boss as well, which we won't speak about, but it's very cool to experience as well, and one of my favorite endgame bosses in terms of just, like,
there's a
the
lot
fight
of
and the flow.
very cool spectacle. Can I just say, like, before I throw it to you, Paradise, like, I really liked fighting Espinas. I know, like, in terms of overall, like, all the monsters we fought, it might not have been the most standout one, but again, like I said before in videos, like, as someone that never played Frontier, I was really excited for this fight. And although, like, on paper and on the surface, it's just like another Wyvern, and it might not be as, you know, might not have the same spectacle as, say, like Gore or some of the other fights, I did really like it. Like, it was super cool, like the whole sort of triple threat thing, and like some of the moves it has. It was like, and it was just kind of cool to see stuff from Frontier. So I really do hope that like people enjoy that fight specifically, and I hope Capcom pays attention to that and sees like the excitement around people liking Frontier stuff, because there is a massive, like, to this point, you know, I was saying like how we get sort of monster fatigue sometimes, like, you know, them bringing back monsters all the time. There's a massive catalogue of monsters in Frontier that probably a lot of people haven't ever encountered. So if they want to bring stuff back, like, just start pulling from that, because I'll happily just be like, yeah, just pump more Frontier stuff in here. But what about you, Paradise, on the monster front?
We'll just say Espinas was really cool, but there's definitely cooler ones in Sunbreak. I do think you're right though. There's a lot of Frontier monsters that they could bring back. I see a lot of people asking for it online as well. Like, there's some really cool ones. One thing I wanted to say on the monster front is we had a unique experience in that we've been playing and sort of discovering what monsters are in there outside of the ones that were already announced. But as of right now, with the recent stream that they did, almost everything's been revealed, if not everything. So
that was quite a
I don't really understand what they're thinking when they do this, because there's such a joy, and I think we even said this in the Base Rise review, because I think they did the same. They always do it, right?
Yeah.
There's a special joy in going in. You get to like a certain MR and you go into a hunt and you're like, there's a monster in there that you've never seen before, you didn't expect to be in there, and that's a really cool feeling. And most people that are following, you know, all of the trailers and stuff like that, then they're not going to get that feeling, because they like to show everything off. In terms of like the monsters themselves, I did enjoy a lot of the new monsters added in. I think it's for me, it blends in with the difficulty question that I think a lot of people have, like, you know, oh, Rise was maybe too easy for them. Is Sunbreak with Master Rank gonna be better? And we played through a lot of it in high rank gear, because we wanting to kill and get through the monsters like at a good pace, so we could see what unlocks and how we get new things and stuff like that. So it's a little bit skewed because we didn't have as high defense as we would have done if we farmed a full Master Rank set off the bat. But they hit pretty hard, a lot of them. That being said, I didn't really feel a tremendous amount of difficulty, you know, until the really high Master Rank stuff, you know. So I'm really keen to hear what people have to say on that matter, because if they go into it expecting, you know, oh, it's G rank, it's going to mess me up, I don't know that it will mess you up until you, like, you know, you get like tens of hours in the game and you start unlocking some of the much higher up monsters. So it was interesting. I expected to get my butt kicked a few times, and I feel like it didn't quite happen as often as I was anticipating with a Master Rank expansion.
Yeah, I didn't really notice the difficulty spike. It just felt like playing Rise again, if you know what I'm saying, like base Rise again. It just felt like that. Even though we were in like higher rank gear, we weren't getting clomped, but maybe we're just seasoned players now, and we know how to not get clomped and die. But there is some stuff at endgame that will take other like players longer to do if you don't have like a fully functioning team. We did go in with like a team and we know what we're doing and all of that stuff, so it might be difficult for like other players, but in general find it pretty easy. But you got to remember, like even with the world cycle and what they went in, people weren't crying until Electrum came out and Fatalis came out, really. So I'm guessing that's where it's all heading, where it's going to be that culmination of those like marquee monsters that everybody wants to come back for and defeat and be like, I am a monster hunter. You know what I'm saying?
Let me just say real quick as well, to expand on the monster fatigue that you guys have talked about. The summary of that is if you've played like a majority of Monster Hunter games, then you fought like Rathian and Rathlos as an example a lot. You know their moves, you know what they're going to do, you know when to counter, you know when to dodge, you know when they're going to do the tailspin or shoot a fireball. So when you fight like a master rank version of that, or like you get a new expansion come out, and like there's a variant of that monster, for example, it's not like a new monster experience as a veteran player, right? So that's what the monster fatigue is. It's like it's the same monster in previous games, even though it might be new in this game or a new variant. It doesn't feel new, and that might just be for people like us that have played those games and have got used to those monsters and their patterns. But maybe for a fresh player, those kind of encounters will be really exciting.
I will say though, like playing through, this is the first time. Like, I mean, Monster Hunter. Okay, you don't typically play Monster Hunter for the story, right? I'm sure some people do. I don't. I play it to hunt monsters. But I will say this is the first time in my Monster Hunter history I actually paid attention to the story throughout, because it was kind of cool. They had some cool cutscenes in, especially now that like sometimes the followers join you. It actually makes it kind of cool, because in the past it would always be like, I don't know, even in Rise, someone would be like, oh yeah, you know, there's a thing, we must work together, and then like you go out on your own. It's like you're not working together, you just turn up at the end. Whereas now Fiorine will be like, we must work together, and she'll actually come with you and she'll be a badass. So I will say I do like the story progression, kind of just the way they present the story through this time. So I feel like playing through it, despite some of the sort of stuff we said with like the slow pacing and stuff, I feel like when you do encounter those, you know, you encounter the new monsters, you get the cutscenes, even if it's like returning monsters, they still have their own cutscenes and stuff, and they're very sort of cool in this one. So I do like what they have done with that. But let's talk about like skills as well, because obviously, you know, again, you get given like one of your skills pretty early on, but it's like not the most exciting one, and then later on you get the other ones. In terms of like unlocking these progression wise, it's a lot more straightforward than Rise. It doesn't require all the sort of finicky stuff as before. You will, largely speaking, just encounter these as you progress, but some of the skills obviously are very cool. I'm going to say right now, as a Sword and Shield main, I love my new wire dash skill. I call it the Captain America special, where you run forward with the shield. They have just gone even further in Sunbreak to basically make it the shield and sword, not the sword and shield. It does still have some cool sword combos, to be clear. The whole switch skill stuff is very nice, and there's I've spent, largely speaking, a lot of time with raw damage right now, but the new tasty sword X combo does actually line up nicely with things like elements and status, so that's really cool. But I will say, yeah, I mean, even though we saw 2 of the 3 switch skills in each of the preview videos, having a chance to actually like test them out in much greater detail. Some weapons, I feel like you maybe use them a lot more. Like 2.6, I know you'll touch on like the longsword stuff, like you're swapping all the damn time. Whereas some other weapons you might swap a little bit. You, like for example me, my typical flow, sword and shield, I'll apply destroyer oil. I switch back to a playstyle that has like wire dash and Metsu. You know, I'm there doing like shield bashes, like the combos, like Metsus wherever I can. And then I sort of switch back. And of course, if I were to then factor in the elemental side of things, there'll be a little bit more switching. Whereas other places, like you've got a whole like, I mean, you might as well talk about it. Your longsword playstyle is quite like you're really using those skills, right?
Yeah, so that's the thing. So over like the time that we've had it, I spent some time trying to get like good, because in Rise I was decent at that game. Like I was decent with the longsword. So with this one, stepping into using the switch skills, I don't think people realize like how much depth there's going to be into like the playstyle variety that you're actually going to have access to, because essentially there's choices that have to be made of like what you're going in with. Do you have the same skills on both scrolls? So if you don't know what the setup is for switch skills, you have 2 scrolls and you can switch between them, and those scrolls have different skills on them. So you can have like up to 4 different switch skills on those ones, or you can have 2 of the same, or 3 different switch skills. But for me, for instance, on the longsword, I'm using one scroll to build meter and the other one to use it to dispose of that meter or to utilize that meter or to kind of like really put out my most powerful attacks. That might be my helm breakers or the new Seething Sheath Slash, which is absolutely 10 out of 10 awesome. Every longsword player should try this thing out. It is got some mad depth to it in terms of like it's got a guard point, it's got like a whole automatic counter on it, it's got the biggest fattest attack. I've been doing wake up hits with the longsword. It's a madness. But yeah,
the new greatsword.
Yeah, it's like the new greatsword. But the real mechanics that really come into it is like there's skills that actually feed into the switch skills, like redirection, that give you back your meter as well. So a lot of the switching comes from me building up my bar with my first like blue scroll, or I think it's the orange scroll actually, the orange scroll, and then swapping to either do like a helm breaker or do like the sacred slash, and switching back and doing that all the time. And it's quite quick to switch back as well, so you can dodge or you can just stand there, or if you get a redirection it will automatically dodge you out the way and give you a bar back, which is nuts.
It does depend on your playstyle and your weapon though. I think that there will probably be a large portion of people that will probably just have the same skills on both scrolls and maybe have like one new Silkbind in, and it's largely going to be the same combos that they're going to do of base Rise, depending on their weapon and depending on if they're doing like elemental status or raw and stuff like that. To change that, like you sort of said, Alex, to change your switch skills to like the elemental option versus the KO option. So it will depend on those kind of things. Like I played like pretty much a lot of dual blades in Sunbreak so far, and although I do have two different setups on each page, they largely feel the same to play, because like on one hand I have Piercing Bind, on the other I have Spiral Slash, then there's like a buff and then there's like a counter. So although there is that swap element to it, it's largely like swap buff, swap back, wait on the monster until I need to reapply it, you know?
But I feel like it's leading somewhere. I don't know, because we haven't unlocked all the weapons on all the armor. What if there's a weapon or an armor that actually switches from raw to element if you switch skill? That would be super sick. So then you can have both a raw and elemental weapon once you're switching skills, and benefit from like some of your faster hitting attacks on like the blue scroll rather than like on the orange scroll having your raw attacks or something like that. That'll be
definitely cool. But I think what you touched on before, though, I do think this is gonna be really good. I feel like this is one of the things that will like give this game the longevity, right? Because you spoke before about like, sure, sometimes on things like the monster roster and things might be like a little light. And while obviously you only have 3 skills, I feel like people are not gonna, in their first week of playing, they're not gonna start to like click completely with the depth. I mean, maybe if you're like a weapon savant or something, but largely speaking, people are gonna jump in, do what they're familiar with, test out a few new moves, and it's only really after you start to like do those continual hunts that you're really going to start being like, oh wait, this links into here, this does that. And I feel like that level of play, and also it gives you so many more ways to play before. Like typically, if you've looked in the past, like okay, yeah, you can run the weapon however you want. I mean, you can run around with a sword and shield and use the quote unquote least optimal combo and still kill the monster, still have fun. That's great. Ultimately, as long as you're having fun, I couldn't care less. But there would typically be this sort of agreed way that like, oh, you want to do damage, then this is your combo. Oh, you want to do damage, this is your Silkbind skill. Whereas now, because you have that freedom, there's going to be a lot more playstyles per weapon, which I think is very exciting because it just gives you like so much more variety. Like even if you down to in the past, like some people like to just play one weapon. Like I feel like you get most variety, obviously, if you play more. But even if you just play one weapon, you're not going to have to always play the same way. Like even in Sword and Shield, like I mixed a few things up the other day, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to just change a few of these things, and it's just like it just feels fresh again. So I do think this. I'm really excited to sort of see how people get on with this. Whether it be speedrunners, whether it be other people like that in general. I do feel like we're going to see some pretty cool stuff that like maybe in the first week won't present itself, but then fast forward a couple of weeks once people have really got some time under their belt, you're going to start seeing some pretty manic switch skill stuff.
Yeah, especially on like weapons that didn't really shine in base Rise. Like I picked up the hammer for a little bit just because I needed a blunt weapon, and I really disliked hammer in like base Rise. Like we made a whole video on our tier list and we were roasting like, the hammer. The hammer, guys, Church of Hammer dudes, and all the hammer bros out there, I apologize. Like that weapon is so fun to play and actually deals out some nasty damage in Sunbreak. So I think you guys are going to be pretty happy with this game, to be honest. So yeah, you're going to enjoy your time just bonking things on the head and charging and switch charging and all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Can I just roll us back to story for 1 sec? Because in Base Rise, there was this whole like segmented story thing where like the game was impacted by world situation, and so you hit a certain point and it just like stopped. In this new Sunbreak expansion, it has a start, it has an end. It's its own encapsulated thing, which I really like to see. So it wasn't like you hit a certain point and it was like you just got to wait until they add it in. So I really liked that it was an entirely from start to finish experience in terms of the story and the progression there, and also to briefly touch on follower missions, because the follower missions are a lot of people are excited for that, and I've done quite a lot of them. I've seen a lot of people talking about them being excited because there are a lot of solo hunters out there, and the followers are actually pretty cool. They're actually pretty good as well. Believe it or not, I've seen followers put traps down to help you out. I've actually seen followers flash a monster when it's like limping and about to fly away, and it flashes out the sky, and I'm like, am I playing with a real player? Because that's like that's a really cool thing to see from an AI support, NPC character. They do cool damage. It's fun to have them there. You can customize them slightly in the weapon they want to use when you go out on the survey missions. So when it comes to like people that are excited for that aspect of things and the solo side of it, I actually think people are going to be happy with it. It's really cool to have a hunter with you that isn't another player because you maybe don't have online or you don't have that friend to play with and hunt with. So I was really quite pleased with that.
The really cool thing is, like, we were mesmerized when Fiorine came back in, like, wyvern riding. We were like, what is going on here? So that was, like, really cool. So they're capable of, like, wyvern riding monsters and stuff, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, Fiorine is cool. Like, I'll say nothing other than there is a moment where she is an absolute badass. When you guys have encountered it, please come back and let us know that you have seen it. You will know exactly what I'm talking about when you encounter it. That's all I'm saying. Fiorine is an absolute badass. But yeah, that is. Yeah, and it's also worth talking about as well. Like, just to kind of give people clarity, the follow missions effectively become like your village quest because they are the solo things. This game for Sunbreak, obviously for Rise, they moved away from what they did in World and they went back to the traditional village quest and hub quests, which like that was obviously always, if you guys have played older Monster Hunter games, that used to be the tradition. You had village quests, which you would just do on your own, then you had hub quests, and then of course in World they made the switch where everything could be played multiplayer if you wanted to, or of course you play it solo. Then in Rise they went backwards. This of course makes that return again to the sort of more world style format, in that like all of the kind of master rank quests you do, they're all just considered hub quests, so you can do them solo if you want. There's of course scaling, but you can also do the multiplayer, which honestly I prefer. I would much rather just have the opportunity to play everything with my friends if I want to. If I don't want to, you can do it solo, but follow quests effectively do act as your village quests, so if you do like the system, they technically speaking do still exist and you have a follower to go with you, so they are definitely pretty cool. But let's move on to talk about Master Rank and Endgame stuff. So I'm gonna lead with this one because I feel like I always throw it to you.
So this is
first.
kind of like more the spoiler-y section.
Yes.
It's like we're not going to go ham on the spoilers, so it's not going to be story spoilers or anything like that, but we will be referencing stuff that is at the end of the game, maybe some weapons, maybe some monsters that you haven't you will have seen in trailers, so because everything's been revealed in the trailers, but it won't be anything dramatic that's going to dramatically impact your gameplay experience and ruin the game for you.
Yeah.
But if you want to go in blind, then now's the time to exit. But
also, for context as well, although we're talking about it, embargo restrictions, we won't be able to physically show you the stuff that we are talking about, so you will still see gameplay from early game while we talk about endgame stuff, just so you guys know. But yeah, so yeah, as Tusik said, this would be your point to step away if you don't want to even hear about endgame. But assuming you're still here, let's talk about this. So, endgame, I mean, obviously, Rise didn't really have an endgame. Let's be honest. It was one of the kind of big feedback things that we had before. Your endgame was largely speaking farming monsters to feed into a melding pot to then get some charms, which, let's be honest, was not the most exciting loop. Some people have sort of said before, oh, it's quite similar to like, how you would farm for charms anyway. It's like, it wasn't the same. Like, feeding a pot is not an exciting endgame loop. Like, maybe if you guys enjoyed it, that's cool, but like, I personally I didn't feel that compelled. Once I got to endgame Rise, I loved the game, I enjoyed it, I didn't really feel too compelled to do that. In Sunbreak...
But then they added in the Rampage monsters, the Apex Rampage monsters, which forced you to play like the Rampage mode, which not a lot of people liked as well. So
exactly,
and then you were only really still doing it for your charm,
Yeah, but then so we get into this thing, and again, this is, I feel like Master Rank, the post game end game Master Rank grind once again exacerbates what we spoke about at the beginning with the weird pacing. So obviously you'll do this thing where you get to the end of the game, your master rank unlocks, and you then get an objective, which you would have seen in base Rise, where it's like, hey, progress to this next threshold. At first, it's alright. First, it's like 10 levels. It's like, alright, go to master rank 10. Go to master rank 20, go to master rank 30. You're like, okay, cool. It's, you know, it's manageable objectives. But they do this weird pacing thing again, whereby you get to that threshold, and the urgent is not a new monster. It's not something that you're not like, oh, is this when I'm finally going to fight, like, you know, again, it was shown in the trailer, so I'm allowed to say it. Is this the point where I fight like Shagaru Magala? Or is this when I fight like Furious Rajang? It's like, no, the first few ones are still just like older monsters you fought, even down to the point where, you know, you're fighting like Ibushi and Nawa, which of course is cool to have a master rank version because you get master rank armor sets. I will say, I'm sorry, but like, master rank armor sets normally improve on the base armor sets, and Nawa and Ibushi already had immensely cool armor sets. How did they make them less cool? They went backwards with them. You see one of them in the trailer. I'm sorry, I'm crying that Ibushi has weird ass master rank armor. But anyway, I digress. The point is that exacerbates the thing whereby you get into master rank and you're suddenly now farming quests, and the quests, like, at first you get some like decent XP, but after a little while it's not necessarily too great, and there isn't like, you know, there are some quests that give a little bit more XP, but there's nothing that's like, you know, they haven't dropped an event quest that allows you to really boost MR. So you're kind of grinding away for a few things, you finally get to your threshold, and then you're like, oh, it's not an exciting monster. So you then defeat the urgent, you go again, you progress, and you keep moving, and then once you get to a certain point, those threshold gaps become bigger. Then it's like go from 30 to 50, 50 to 70, 70 to 100. It's quite a grind. Now, the additional component to this is that amongst this, you get access to something called anomaly quests, where basically you fight afflicted monsters. These are very similar to hyper monsters in GU, in that basically they have a lot of health. They also have zones on them that are basically weak spots that you basically want to attack. Unlike hyper monsters, if you get hit by those areas, they also do more damage. These ones are slightly different in that if you don't hit these areas and don't pop these areas, then eventually they can do like a big Nova attack that does a lot of damage. And of course, they can also inflict you with the Blood Blight that Malzeno has. So it's all about kind of the whole, like, the little weird purple, pink, sucky things that fly around the sky.
Curios.
Yeah, they're called curios. Yeah, it's all about them, basically. So your endgame grind effectively becomes farming anomaly monsters, which when you kill them, they give you endgame materials, which will then allow you to upgrade your weapons to master rank, to rank 10, rarity 10. There will, in theory, at some point, I believe there should be like an armor set. I saw one in the trailer that we haven't encountered yet. I think there'll be like an armor set that uses these parts. We haven't got it just yet. We are currently just shy of master rank 100. So once we get to 100, we of course get to fight the new Magnamalo they showed in the trailer. And yeah, this is kind of the position we're at right now, where I feel like for players that, you know, hardcore Monster Hunter players that just love the grind, they'll of course continue to progress through. If you are sort of a more like casual Monster Hunter player, I feel like the progression towards endgame, once you've got past the first few like 10, 20, 30 thresholds, the big gaps do slow down the pace massively, and you're effectively fighting tanky versions of monsters you've already fought, because the first few ranks are just like the low tier monsters beefed up. So you're fighting like an Anomaly Azeros, a Tetranodon, a Ludroth, a Rathian. You know, we're getting to the point now we're fighting like Garangom or Azure Somnicanth, different things like that, Aurora Somnicanth even, but we haven't got to the point where we've encountered like beefed up versions of like the exciting monsters, and that hasn't presented itself, whether they're in the game or whether they come later, because the roadmap does say they're introducing powered up monsters, so it might well be that we've kind of reached that threshold and we won't be fighting like an Anomaly, say, Gormagala for a few months. Who knows? This much we haven't confirmed just yet, but that is basically your endgame grind. Fight these monsters, get materials, and it's a bit long.
It's just that the like kind of like you touched on, the more casual player that, or maybe even like more than a casual player but not quite a hardcore player, might get to like MR30 and then never encounter anything after that, because it's a real grind, like you're saying, to get up there. And along that grind, and maybe it's because, like you said, they haven't introduced event quests that give you like extra MR, so you do a quest and you get like half of an MR bar and you're like, I need to get to 100 and these monsters are just the same monsters that we fought in base Rise, but they have quadruple the health. So it's I would rather fight an afflicted monster that I've already fought than the regular monster, or than to go into a rampage and do that whole thing. So I would rather have this than that, but it doesn't feel like the best it could be, considering that they expect you to do these hunts so many times.
Yeah, afflicted monsters are not like drastically harder than your normal like master rank monster. It's just that they have like some massive health pool, so the fights go on for like a lot longer than your normal version of that master rank version as well. I will say the core aspects of the endgame that I do think are really cool is that there are rarity 10 versions of most of the weapons for most of the monsters. So like in past games, you might have like lower rarities like rarity 8, and the maximum rarity might be rarity 9, and you might have a rarity 6 version of like Azaros's weapon. Like most of the monsters, including Azaros, have like a rarity 10 version. So there's going to be a lot of build like variety there in terms of what you're building. When it comes to melding as well, they've added in the MP accelerant, meaning that you don't necessarily need to go into a quest to roll your charms now. You can actually just use an item and do it. Where do you get the MP accelerants from?
It's from the Argosy. So it's one of those things where you'll get them over time by doing hunts. So it's like it offsets the need to go into a hunt to activate your meld, but you still need to go into hunts to like progress the Argosy to get the item to skip it. So it's like it's really nice that it's there, and you will get a lot of them over time, but at the beginning you're just going to get a few of them and you won't use them, and you're still going to have to hunt anyway. So it doesn't make a massive difference, I would say.
Yeah,
and there's definitely skills that you are going to want to get, because a lot of the decoration crafting material depends on doing these afflicted monsters and stuff like that. But it's nice to have the option to hunt a bunch of different monsters, even though the afflicted monsters do feel a little bit, I don't know, they feel okay. I wouldn't say that they necessarily feel amazing, but we haven't unlocked everything. So I'm withholding my like final judgment of like how the full endgame is until we get like more updates, until we get more into the game, until we got Pirate Magnum Arlo.
Exactly. Yeah. Just to reiterate what you're saying there, just to give people context. Obviously, we've tried to play through like as much as possible to ensure that when we speak about this today, we give you like the full picture. We are currently sitting at like 10 ranks short of Master Rank 100, which, as far as we're aware, is the last thing we need to unlock. So it might well be that once we unlock that, there's like a few more things that showcase, and if that's the case, we'll obviously do a follow-up video and talk about, we'll be talking about everything in the game anyway. Like we're again still super enjoying what we're playing, but it is definitely it's just, I guess it's that age-old thing of like, largely speaking, in Monster Hunter, it's always been that game where you just like, you get to end game, you farm some stuff, you farm some difficult stuff, you make armor sets and stuff. And I think this is the thing. I think in the game there's going to be a lot of build diversity, a lot more than there ever has been before, and this is the really exciting thing. I think if you like making mix sets, you like crafting different armor sets, like in base Rise, it was almost like, here's a few, much like you've seen in like World and things like that, here's a few very good armor sets. You basically be using these if you want to do maximal damage. It's not always about doing damage, but that's kind of how it was. Whereas this time around, there's a lot of good armor sets, a lot of nice slots. There's the introduction of rampage decorations, which now allows you to then add another layer to your weapons. The fact that you could, of course, use the anomaly monsters to craft almost all weapons up to rarity 10, meaning almost all weapons become viable. Yeah, sure, you'll still have some of the best weapons. You might still say like, a not like level 10, I don't know, like Furious Rajang weapon might still be higher DPS than Azeros, but it still means that you can take like a rarity 10 version of a monster you like and make it viable. So I do feel like it's going to give you a lot more variety in terms of things that you can actively use, which I think that is definitely very, very exciting. So all in all, it is definitely like, it's super cool. And they've introduced also like lots of other like small things. Like if we touch on some of the like miscellaneous things, there's a lot of like Paradise. I'll let you go into this in a minute. There's a lot of cool new stuff for the buddies. The whole like, the buddy system is cool. Like there's some additions to the Argosy. There's a few more things like the Meowsnaries. A lot of the like in-game systems have also had additional things like added to them, which in and of itself is really cool. There's like lots and lots of small cool things in Sunbreak. Sunbreak has like lots of these like micro moments that are like, oh, this is awesome. And we've had tons of like fun experiences where we're just playing through and we're like, this is so cool. But again, like some of those things are then just interspersed with lots of like moments of not as much stuff going on, which perhaps like skews our vision a little bit. But yeah, talk on some of the Palico stuff.
Yeah, I was really you saw it. I was really happy when we sort of discovered this as we were playing, that they've expanded and just it way improved the quality of life to the whole buddy system. In base Rise, it was all RNG. You had to like really pay attention to it. You had to read all the skills to know what you wanted, the different Palico like classes, like for example, and then the different random skills and the different random memory skills. But now in Sunbreak, they've added in like different layers to it that just make it so much nicer. You can basically change your buddy moves. You can change your buddy memory skills. You can expand their memory. There's new like secret support moves that are absolutely awesome. One of them in particular is a player activated firework. It's so cool. It does so much damage. It's so fun. There are other ones as well. I know. I absolutely love the new systems that they've added. Obviously, there's like the new Palamute Silkbind gear that shoots it's like a little heavy bowgun on its back. So they've added a lot of new buddy stuff that is to be honest, it's just improved the whole buddy system, and it means that people can spec it how they want it without having to like rely on the RNG aspect of it, which is just an overall win. A slight change of topic since we're talking about like some MISC stuff. I didn't encounter a single bug, a single crash, or anything like that. You know, when we're talking about like a game review, sometimes when you're playing a new game, those things happen. But I didn't encounter any visual bugs, any crashes, any glitches, anything like that. So in terms of like the polish of the game in like its technical side, I was quite impressed.
Definitely, yeah. 26, any sort of like final MISC things, because we're gonna have to cut it a little bit short.
I want to say like final MISC things, but I just want to like, just for clarity, because I know some people in the comments will like listen to the first 40 minutes of us like kind of really saying that we like it, but we're not like blown away and thinking that it's not a good game. Like, it's a Monster Hunter game, and at its base is still like a fun game. So if you enjoyed Rise, like at the start I said, if you didn't enjoy Rise, you won't necessarily enjoy this one. But if you do enjoy Rise, you will definitely enjoy this game, because it is like super fun to play. And the new stuff that they've added definitely expands on the systems, and the quality of life improvements that they've added are in like droves of like what you can do and have fun with. So I enjoyed the game. I just wasn't necessarily blown away with all of it didn't feel super new, if you know what I'm saying. There wasn't like a bunch of new stuff being thrown at me and I'm getting those dopamine hits from a bunch of new stuff like popping off at this all at the same time. But there was new stuff that when it did drop was super exciting, and there is new systems that are like incredible. So
100%, you're definitely right. I think just to echo that as well, like we really enjoyed our time playing through it, and I think the way that I sort of phrased it earlier, there's lots of like micro moments that are like all very, very cool. It's just sort of like the pacing is just perhaps a little bit off, but overall, if you like Monster Hunter, you're gonna love this. If you enjoyed Rise, you're gonna love this. It's more of what you loved. 100%, and like lots of the new systems are super cool, and obviously we're still playing it, we're still enjoying it, we're still obviously, I might have complained a little bit about the pacing of the MR Grind, but we're still playing it like every single day. Obviously, of course, we're making videos, but also we're just enjoying playing it and stuff. So it is still a super fun game. But there's just a few things that you guys need to know. I will say, Gallius has a beard, and I still don't have a beard. They added a couple of beard options, but it's basically the same beard. The same goes for like hairstyles. There's not too much diversity on that front, so a little bit sad. Maybe they'll add them later in the same way they did voice packs and stuff. But anyway, we are planning to upload another video later on today, and we have a limit of what we can show you guys. So we're going to cut this review ever so slightly short, guys. But stay tuned. We have plenty of videos coming. We'll be talking about all different systems. If you guys want to know more about anything, let us know in the comments down below. We will, of course, be spinning up videos on them. But for the time being, guys, I think that's pretty much it. If you guys have missed some of our recent videos, check out one of these ones on screen. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next video.